is Invisible Inc., the podcast for under-resourced women entrepreneurs. And I'm your host, Shubha Chakrabarti, founder of Achieve. Join me as I talk to women entrepreneurs about the nuts and bolts of their journeys and to experts who will give you insights that are hard to find anywhere else. Let's jump in. Who are the smartest experts in the innovation system most founders don't even know exist? Why is it fatal to your startup to talk about your big scientific breakthrough too soon? How can you as a founder get the best of both worlds and bring your research to market for great outcomes? In this episode, Laleh Shayesteh, Director of Intellectual Property and Administration in the Office of Technology Licensing at UC Berkeley, talks about how university-based science and technology founders can proactively protect their valuable research, successfully bring their discoveries to market, maximize the return on their work while still leveraging deep resource networks, and much more. Now, here's Laleh. Hey, Laleh, did I say your name right?
Yes.
It's wonderful to have you here today. Thank you so much for being on Invisible Inc.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You had a pretty exciting career. You have a PhD in biophysics. You also have a JD. It's a unique and very impressive background. So you have a role that very few entrepreneurs even know exists. What exactly is tech transfer?
So technology transfer is the process of taking inventions or other, for example, or software or new technologies that come around to the university and licensing them out either to startup companies that might be coming out of a university or other startup companies or to big industries.
So how did you get into tech transfer and what motivated you to take this job?
I got into tech transfer by chance. So I was doing a lot of research for several years and I had kids and there was a time to either go up the ladder in science or do something else. And I fell in love with wanting to do something else. Basically, at the time I was working at a small startup and the opportunity was there to join the licensing group. And I entered that. I started to work on a patent application as the first thing to do. And I truly fell in love. So then I became a patent agent. Then I went to law school. Then I became a patent lawyer. By then I had started to work at a nonprofit organization that is a government contractor. And then several years after that, I thought, I really want to go back to the university because the university was the one that gave me opportunities, right? Education and everything. And I think it is a role where people who have experience in both science and also in licensing or agreement activities can really, really make a difference. So I really wanted to get back into university and I was very fortunate that Berkeley took me in.
That's fantastic. So which are the parts that you have the most fun with and are there parts that are not so fun or a little bit more challenging?
As far as I'm concerned, every part is fun. So every challenge is an opportunity to do something different, to be more creative. So when people have challenges, I don't see them as bad things. I see them as opportunities to become more creative, to help whoever has been reaching or whoever has been reaching out or having probably an issue, right? How to creatively create better agreements that both parties are going to be happy with, how to creatively make better patent applications. And so I don't see anything as a challenge, really. I do enjoy working with people and trying to figure things out.
That's great. Is there, like in your career, you worked with many companies, many technologies, many patents. Is there one that stands out just because it was so special or so fun or so impactful?
I always say that I take any achievement, any agreements in stride and in little pieces because then keeps everybody humble. And that includes all the agreements that we have done. Without naming names, Berkeley is the creator of a massive technology that is really changing the world of science right now and the world of medicine. That would be one. We also have huge agreements that have to do with synthetic biology, that have to do with, synthetic biology in batteries, in diagnosis. So if I name a name and my inventors hear it and then other inventors did not hear it, then that would be the challenge. I don't don't want to go there.
I know, and I don't want you to go there. We want you to be happy and safe and well compliant within whatever requirements you're required to stick within. So then getting into the actual function of a technology transfer office, what does a TTO actually do?
What we do in our office basically is we take in invention disclosures, we take in software disclosures, and then we work on them. So a software disclosure is an easy one because by the moment we receive the software or the software is created, it's already copyrighted in the name of the creators. But then for when invention disclosures come along, we contact the inventors, we talk with them, we see where the technology is, how it's doing, when they are going to be publishing it. And as a university, we are a publish or perish, just like all other universities. So the threshold to filing a first application is almost zero. So we always file the very first application very quickly. After that, then we start to put out a non-confidential disclosure of the technology on our website. And from there, then we try to license out the technology. A lot of times, the professors, the students, the postdocs already know that they want to make a startup. And so they approach us, or they have connections with other entities, with other companies already, and they bring the companies to us to do a license agreement. And so we also do license agreements, and we take the invention or the technology from cradle to grave, literally. And we also deal with any intellectual property related provisions in different types of agreements that come into university.
Got it. So how does a TTO get organized typically? Who staffs them? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So different TTOs are very different. Our TTO basically is staffed in a two-sister office form. Our sister office is called the IAO. So it's the office that brings in money from big companies. They negotiate agreements, sponsor research agreements from big companies. So we deal with the IP parts, provisions of those agreements, our office. Now, our office deals with, let's say, inventions have been created no matter from where, from government funds or from actually the sponsor funds, right? So what we do is then we deal with the inventions and we then try to license them out. So both our sister office and our office bring in money to the university through different mechanisms. The way we are staffed, our office is staffed, is there is 4 of me in the office. We deal with taking in invention disclosures, licensing technologies, everything that I spoke about. And then we have staff members in our front office who help in to take in the disclosures and also file everything away for us, help us with signing of agreements, be the second sets of eyes that we have.
It sounds like clearly the good part is that you're a revenue generating center. So that's great. And to some extent, it makes monitoring or measuring performance easy. But outside of the revenue aspects, are there other metrics that you use to see how you're doing as a TTO?
So our job in general, right? One is to make money, to bring in revenue into the university. But at the same time, it is to help other units, right? It is to help other units. It is to help the inventors. It is to help everyone else with any intellectual property related questions that they have. But the ultimate measure of performance at the end of the day would be, let's create agreements. Let's have agreements that will bring in money for the university.
And I've had a couple of short conversations with TTOs at other universities, and it seems to me like there are multiple different approaches that different universities take in terms of how the TTO is organized and what the philosophy is. Can you please comment on what some of those approaches are and why a university might take one approach or a philosophy versus another?
Sure. So many TTOs completely divide up what we do. So for example, in our office, like I said, we do everything from cradle to grave, and one person will be responsible for that one technology from cradle to grave. Some of the things we don't do is, for example, in our office, we don't look to see if something is really patentable or really commercializable before we want to file on it. Other TTOs take a very different approach. They actually do look to see if something is patentable. When we are when we have a time pressure, I don't think that's probably the wisest thing to do. But for the specific TTO, that would be excellent. Some staff members only do prosecution. Some staff members only do, let me see how this technology is doing. And some Other staff members only do licensing activities. So they only do licensing. That's a divided part, but if it works for the TTO, more power to them. And in our TTO, for a massive institution like Berkeley, we only have 4 people, like I said, who do this job. And for all the years, for the past 12 years or so, the number of startups that we start is only second to Stanford. Nobody else has as many startups as Berkeley has, and we only have 4 members. That's it. So we're particularly proud of that. Of course, we're also pressured and we're looking for staff members, but
who isn't?
Isn't, yes.
That's really impressive to hear. Coming to the point of the view of the entrepreneur or the researcher, right? So a researcher, an inventor, scientist, typically at what point would they encounter the TTO and what triggers at first contact?
We try when we have new professors, new faculty members to actually have meetings with them, to have conversations or open houses where we provide, hey, we are the technology transfer office. This is what we do. Please provide your inventions to us. Because a lot of staff members don't know very much about inventions, invention disclosures, all of these. But the first thing that triggers normally is number one, because I get to answer a lot of those questions, actually. Number one is somebody says, I'm about to provide this talk or do this publication, and I think there might be something important in here. What do I do next? Or they say, a startup has come to me, or somebody is interested in my technologies or with the work that I do. What do I do next? But most of the time, the first trigger of encounter that we have with our inventors or with the staff members in general, with the employees, is through an invention disclosure.
For those of us who don't know, what is an invention disclosure?
So an invention under US patent law is something that is novel, like nobody else has done it before. It's non-obvious. So if you put the pieces together, nobody has put the pieces together like you have done before, and it is useful. So for example, just to throw out an example, you cannot create a new mouse to just feed it to a lion. The mouse needs to be good, for example, for medical purposes, so you can do research on them. And it needs to be described to somebody like yourself in a way that helps them to understand exactly like you understood it. So if they pick up your invention and go to the lab, they will be able to recreate it. That's called an invention. So an invention disclosure is an act. It's a document that the inventors, those who conceived the original invention, they put together this document. All offices basically have invention disclosure forms where the inventor, and we always ask them, please go there, please go there, please file the disclosure form. Very simple form, what's your name? What did you think of? What is it? Where did the money come from? Because we have obligations to a lot of entities. Like if the government paid for it, the government gets rights. So where did your money come from? And tell us a little bit about what this is. And did you publish it already? Did you talk about it with anyone? And or are you planning to talk about it with anyone or publish it? If you're about to publish it, do you have a document that you're about to publish, like a pre-publication draft? And we ask all of those, and they basically provide those documents to us, and we go from there.
It sounds like it's important that you establish the university's rights to it before it becomes public knowledge. Because I remember I was talking to a VC in life sciences, and one of her pieces of advice to entrepreneurs was she said, please don't go out there and publish it before you make sure that you protected your IP in this.
So any employee of the university, employees are those who get paid by the university. So that would include somebody like me, or also professors and PhD students or postdocs. So undergrads don't have to give there because they pay their own way. Their IP belongs to themselves. But the day we enter into the university, we've signed this agreement that says all my IP will belong to the university. So that has already been established. But if we want to protect the rights to any piece, we will need the disclosure. If we don't get the disclosure, and if we cannot file on it actually in a timely manner, yes, the moment a publication happens, the rights are lost throughout the world and the rest of the world. In the US, we still have 1 year to claim rights. But nowadays, for any inventions, it's the first person who gets to the patent office. So if within that year, somebody else goes to the patent office and files, UC may not want to go after them because it's an extremely costly process. Go after them to say, oh, yep, it was mine and you stole it.
Not worth it. Yeah. So somebody comes to you, I'm about to publish a paper, I found something in the genetic area, let's say, and I file an invention disclosure. What do you do with it next? What happens after that?
So the first thing we do is hopefully they have already done that, the invention disclosure. We have received it. One of the four of us picks it up. And then we run with it, basically, especially when there's a publication that's imminent. We do all of our filing of applications through outside counsel, meaning we hire firms to do these filings for us. We establish relationships with firms that have been working with us for a long time. They know exactly what we want and how we want it. And since I already have, for example, for me, since I already was a patent agent and then a patent attorney before I came in, I know exactly what I want, in these patent applications. So once they draft the application, I will review, the inventors have to review, and then we file the application.
And that's when you've established the rights, right? So you've protected it so that nobody else can come in and claim precedence over you for that specific invention or property.
And then we say, okay, go ahead and publish.
So now they've published, then what happens to that IP? Can you walk us through maybe a generalized example of 2 or 3 different paths to generating or monetizing that IP that you would typically go through with any of these disclosures?
Sure. If it's a software, for example, and we didn't have to file a patent application on it, if it's a software, we advertise the software. Sometimes we will license the software. Most of the software that we do provide, actually, we open source it for the whole world on a really simple basis. So like the whole world use it, even if you want to commercialize, no problem, go on. That has been Berkeley's stance for a long, long time. It's pretty rare that we do software licenses for monetary gain, but we do, and they have been good too. Then we come to the patents. And normally with the patents, then we have to see, or patent applications, remembering that we are licensing something really, really early on. We are a university. We don't have products. We don't have technologies that are advanced. They're really early on, right? So if it's a startup, we enter into simple agreements with a startup. And normally the first agreement we enter into are agreements that say, okay, startup or company, you can work on this technology in-house just by yourselves. You cannot sell it. You cannot advertise it to anyone else, but work on it in-house. And if it works in your hands, come back and then we will talk license, because you, company, need to figure out what it is you want to do with it and how you are going to commercialize it too. And then they come back, hopefully in a couple of years, they come back with a very good commercialization plan. And then from there, we start on a term sheet and then we start negotiating a license agreement.
So there's a time when you know that there's a potential property, as you said, it might be early on, something of value. And then there's a time when they need to go build it, flesh it out, figure out what it's going to look like. Does the university provide any support? As an entrepreneur, should I be looking to the university for support? And if so, how do I, as an entrepreneur, make sure that I'm putting this to the best use? Because that's good for me, that's good for the university, and it's good for the world.
So if the inventor themselves is interested in starting a startup, UC actually has we have a webpage and a huge community of not only inside-facing funds, but also different venues on how to test out your technology, if there are in-house places or small places, so you can actually work on your technology. We even have a research infrastructure commons where the company can come inside the university and use university resources to work on their technology before they move out. So university provides the resources. Our office cannot be on both sides of the table, right? We push out the technology, but we also provide the resources. We tell them, these are all the resources you can go to. And we have a very, very rich vault of resources that any entrepreneur who is interested in starting a startup out of a university can take courses, can take different classes, different venues, talk with others to get their startup up and running.
So in that intervening period, whatever time that is, it sounds like you have a very minimal role. Your only role is the guardian of the intellectual property. And then you start to take an active role once it shows some commercial viability.
Yes. So the prosecution part of it is also like a day job, right? So as the patent application is ongoing, right, prosecution happens, meaning that this patent application goes to the different patent offices, and we start to hear back from the patent offices, and we need to decide where to go, how to go, what to claim, right? And how to tailor our claims to get the best claims possible. Meanwhile, if there is interest in the technology, our job is also to now negotiate a license agreement with the entity that is interested in a license to this technology.
So then you've come to a point where there is a commercial valuation or a commercial opportunity attached to this. Now, I can see 2 or 3 different ways that you mentioned earlier in terms of the paths that this can take, right? One is somebody who has been affiliated or is affiliated with the university wants to take it to market. Can you walk us through a simple overview of what that typically looks like? And then we'll get into the Disney or somebody else coming in and trying to use the property that you have ownership of.
So you put out the 2 perfect examples, right? If it is a startup out of a university, we try to be kind to our own startups. And knowing that startups don't have a lot of money, we structure our deals in a way that entering into a license agreement is not going to be costly, but then we backload the license agreement so that royalties will be high, not that high, but royalties will be what the market requires, but we will also take a bite out of the company, meaning that we will ask for stocks in the company. So if the company does well, we will also do well with them. And it also shows that our skin is in the game, right? Because we are funding the patent applications that is going into this until the company has enough money to pay us back for all the prosecution. If a big company, let's say Disney or massive entity, let's say Pfizer comes around, that same technology is going to be at least 10 times as expensive for them to enter into the agreement because we are never, ever going to get stocks in them. So we handle and we deal with the licenses with massive companies as we would with any other massive company, right? So with the market rates instead of rates for startups out of universities.
And then in this whole process, I'm just curious as a potential entrepreneur would be, there's part of it that says, hey, there's a standard rate of X% royalty fee or Y% licensing fee in a certain industry or a certain category. But are there any other complicated financial calculations that are involved or is it just give me X% and I'm done?
So there's a lot of calculations that will happen, right? So think about it this way. We provide what we know to be the best numbers or how we can find out the best numbers for this particular category of technology. And we enter into conversation with the potential licensee. Of course, it is possible that the licensed technology or product is not going to be the only one that they're going to be selling, right? Maybe we are providing one piece of the whole puzzle. So now we have to discuss with them, how will we deal with the royalties in this case? Or if you want to sub-license this technology, or if you have to get a license to somebody else's technology, in addition to ours, how do we deal with those royalties? How do we deal with those numbers? So we have to be creative, and both sides have to be creative and also a little bit flexible on how we negotiate these numbers to get to the best numbers possible so that the licensee is happy and we will bring in money for the university as well.
Got it. And this is where I imagine what you talked earlier about having to be creative and having to come up with different...
Oh, yeah.
It's all going to come into the picture.
That's exactly when the rubber hits the road, literally.
And just looking back on your time, either at Berkeley or before that, are there aspects of this whole deal or arrangement that require you to be more creative than not? And if so, can you just talk about generally what dimensions of the deal would require that level of creativity?
So really all dimensions of the deal, because aside from all the verbiage, right, a deal is a bunch of numbers. So if you pressure one number down, you have to be able to increase the number, somewhere else in that agreement. Or if you're completely eliminating the number, let's say a startup is coming to me that literally has no money, but they're interested in the license agreement. And so maybe I won't take money for the first couple of years, but then we will take money. So all of them can be interesting, and all of them need to be numbers variations that we work out with the potential licensee So they will walk off happy. They will be able to bring their technology to the marketplace, and we will also be happy and able to support them in their quest.
Got it. So I assume that in this process, do you have to deal with a lot of what I'll call financial scenario analysis or very heavy calculations to understand what some potential outcomes might be, or is it not that complicated?
It's not that complicated. We have floors, right? So if somebody says that I'm going to be mixing your technology with 30 different technologies, I'm not going to go down to 1/30th, right? This university is not going to go down to 1/30th. We will put a floor. We just need to be reasonable with each other. At the end of the day, the numbers work themselves out. We really don't want to pressure them or us into complicated calculations. Ultimately, a bunch of numbers that we are both going to be happy with, and which turn out to be sort of the same as we started, except with some variations. Yeah.
So all of this means that, let's say, like every day or every month, some new technology is going out and now it's starting to earn money. So does your office also have some kind of an accounting back office? Like how do I, as an entrepreneur, stay in touch with the technology transfer office? What is a typical tenure? And during that tenure, how do I make sure that the numbers are working out and the cash is flowing and everything is clean?
So we do have one finance person and compliance person in our office. So the license agreement takes care of a lot of those issues, because one of the things that we absolutely want from the licensee, remember I said that commercialization plan. And the reason for that is we are an entity that is funded by federal government, state government, and taxpayers, such as yourself and me. We expect the university to do the best with the technologies that come out of the university. So when a licensee comes along, they provide a diligence plan that gets them to the commercialization. That diligence plan will be in the license agreement, and we will keep their feet to the fire on those diligence timelines and plans. So before they commercialize, they tell me, for example, I'm going to go into the beta mode. I'm going to be doing marketing plans. I'm going to hire 3 C-suite individuals. Then I'm going to do this, that, and some year down the line, I'm going to be commercializing it. If it's a biological or potential possible compound, then it's going to go first phase, second phase, third phase, and then FDA approval, and then commercialization, right? So we keep their feet to the fire, and some milestones may come along as well. Once they commercialize, then on a quarterly basis, they have to tell us what they have done, how much they have made, and then provide us the royalties. UC is special because there is 10 campuses altogether, and all of us, all 10 campuses, work with what I like to call the mothership. That's Office of the President, and Office of the President handles all the financials for all the universities. So when we want to either invoice the entity or they need to give us royalty money, it all goes through the main accounting system, which is fine. When they're non-compliant, that's when our finance director goes after them and makes sure that what's going on, where are you with your payments? And we deal with it that way. So it's a 2-layer finances, but we deal with it all together and very well.
Fantastic. This is fascinating. I had no idea about the level of complexity. So thank you for laying it out. So it's almost as if the diligence plan, if you think about it, right, and how you're monitoring it from the TTO, you're almost like a mini VC firm, because it's like a VC firm is sitting there. The founder is committed to all these milestones. And it sounds like it's almost exactly the same thing that you're doing, because you're watching over the value of the investment you've made and your future cash flow that's coming out of.
Of course, but the VC's motivation and our motivation are different, right? The VC's motivation is, I want to make money. Our motivation is, we need to make sure that the licensee is not putting our technology on the shelf while they are developing a competing technology that's going to do better for them. That's why we want the diligence plans. That's my job. If it brings money, hey, that's fantastic. But we need to make sure that our technologies are seeing the best light of day for as many people as we possibly can.
It's really fascinating. So then let's say that you have this portfolio of patents, you have all of these intellectual property rights, broadly speaking, right? So you've got this big portfolio, especially for a university of your size. How do you manage this portfolio? It's a portfolio of assets, right? So what approach do you take to manage these? And especially when it comes to, like, let's say a single entrepreneur like me, I've licensed something from you. There's always risk to the property. You can take an approach of what's my theory of patents, right? Do I want to scare off other people? Do I want to go trolling? Like, what's the value of the patent? So what is your approach to that? And how do you make decisions as to how to protect, how much money to spend, and how you'll work with the entrepreneur in case of threats to the IP?
Okay. So as a university, our job is, I always come back to the fact that as a university, our job is research and education, not gambling money. Our threshold becomes higher and higher each time we want to move forward with the filing. So the very first filing that we do is almost a no-brainer. We always do the first filing easily. The second one, we start to go, should we really do the next filing or not? Dear professor, how is this technology coming along, right? What are you doing? Because we haven't received commercial interest. The third stage is when the application becomes really expensive. And by then, if we haven't had any commercial interest, chances of moving forward for our office to pay for patent costs is pretty low. It's pretty low unless the professors are absolutely committed and the work is coming along, but it is a technology that honestly takes a very long time to come to fruition. But if we have a licensee and we're moving together and we want to enforce the patent, which is your question, enforcements only happen if the licensee is an exclusive licensee. So they have all the rights to the technology and they are sitting in our shoes. Because they're sitting in our shoes, we allow them. We say, okay, you think somebody is walking all over our technology? Prove it to me. They have to prove. They can't just say, I think they're doing this and we're going to go after them. They have to do their due diligence 100% and completely. If they have done their due diligence, if they have been good, and if we agree, then they can go ahead and sue. UC always reserves the right to join or to not join. And if we absolutely get dragged in, then they're going to have to pay for us too. But most of the time, if the licensee has been good, if they're paying, if the technology is good, and if somebody is literally walking over the rights, then we will likely join. But, those are.
So then let's say I take something, some life sciences thing, I'm going along, I'm doing this stuff, and then suddenly a new application or some adjacent discovery or area of opportunity shows up as I am the licensee. So somebody says, hey, have you thought about applying it in this area? Or have you thought about that? And the new line opens up. So then what happens? Do I come back to you and say, hey, I figured this out. Will you help me, for example, file a patent in a different classification? I'm not an expert. I'm just making this up. So how do future opportunities and future applications play into it? And what role do you play? And what role does the entrepreneur play?
So that's two questions. It will have two answers, really. So if you are the entrepreneur who has moved on, has a company, and you find another technology that is very similar, your job to go file for yourself. Now your company will need to take it. It has nothing to do with UC anymore. You go on, you do your thing, because my job is to take care of patents and technologies that come out of the university, not technologies out there. If technologies come out of university that are bifurcations, and remember that invention disclosure, one of the invention disclosure questions is, who do you think might be interested in this? And the inventor might say, look, company X who already licensed that technology will be interested. So we will, of course, reach out to that company, but we will not be freely giving it to them. They will have to negotiate or pay us a little more or a lot more to get that technology as well.
So then we've gone along, I've licensed it. Is there a typical term? And if so, what happens at the end of that term? Like what happens to me as an entrepreneur? I've been using your technology. It's a critical part of my offering. What happens next?
So a patent from the date that is filed nationally has a 20-year lifetime. And the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, under the law, gives us the right to stop others from making, using, or selling the technology in exchange for providing how we did it to the public. So the life of a patent is 20 years from the date that it was filed. So all of our licenses have a 20-year life. All of our licenses have the life to the last patent expiration. Once it expired, have fun, enjoy.
Have you seen a lot of that happening? Like where patents have expired and entrepreneurs have gone on to do...
Yes, of course. Some companies are really successful, and they go on and do whatever. And that's perfectly fine with us. We cannot reach more than we should be deserving. We also license actual materials, right? Not just technology, but materials. Let's say mice or plasmids and stuff that have come out of the labs under material agreements, right? And sometimes when people ask for those have a life of, let's say, 5 years, 10 years, something. And if they want to use the material for longer, then they come back and they just ask for it longer. These are difficult materials to recreate. If it's software has a particular lifetime. It doesn't go on forever. We say 10 years. If you're interested, come back. We give you another 10 years. We try to be reasonable.
Got it. You've worked with a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of scientists. Are there typical best practices that they should follow, especially if they have an interest in personally commercializing it as an entrepreneur? And also, are there don'ts, like pitfalls that they should avoid to make sure that they're not compromising their own value or the value of the university's properties?
So the answer to both of those is one thing: do not publish, do not talk about it to others before you provide an invention disclosure. Or if you want to talk about it, come to us. We will help you with a non-disclosure agreement, right? So if we want to talk about your new technology with company X, come to us, provide us with a disclosure, and we will use the disclosure as a basis to say, company X, Professor ABC wants to speak with you about this technology. Please sign that you are not going to be disclosing it to anyone else, nor are you going to be using it in any bad way. And then they can talk.
And then from then on, it goes into whatever path it takes, and you'll handle it appropriately from there. So I want to ask a slightly related but slightly tangential question. I've read some research that says that women in science tend to file fewer patents than men. Is that true? And also related to that, have you seen any differences in terms of how women scientists or women discoverers have handled both the patents themselves and the potential for commercialization, where there might be a lesson for other women to learn from?
So in Berkeley, we are particularly lucky that no, we don't have any difference between number of men or women who provide disclosures. They're pretty much equal. As far as startups, I can tell you 100% that women work 1,000,000% more than men do. And unfortunately, women get a lot less money from VCs than men do. And that's something we're really trying to work hard on with VCs, with any companies that come along. And as universities, as a whole bunch of universities together, women get a fraction of what men entrepreneurs can get as far as VC funding is concerned. So I am very fortunate. I work with a lot of women entrepreneurs and that are taking technologies out of the university. And I can tell you without a doubt that they work 100% more, really, really a lot more than gentlemen do to get their technologies funded and moving.
And is there, like, just from all the experiences you've had and all the conversations, are there tips or potential areas or things you can offer that might help to equalize this funding gap that we all know exists? What have you learned?
I wish we could, so one of the things we do is we put the numbers out there, right? We keep putting the numbers out there and the statistics out there and ask the VCs, consider this when you are trying to put money. And we also try to pivot the women entrepreneurs also to the VCs that are being led by women. That's the best we can do, right?
I keep asking because this is like my personal mission. So I keep asking.
It's a difficult mission. Hopefully we will get to a place where funding will be independent from the gender of the person.
Yep. From your lips to God's ears, as they say. So then moving to a slightly different topic. So far, we've talked about the property that's sitting within the walls of the university, so to speak. But there are patents and intellectual property that's being created even outside the walls of a university, where maybe somebody doesn't have access to the resources of a TTO like somebody within the university. So what tips would you give them to protect and to commercialize this, given that they don't, especially women and underrepresented women, so that they can have the best shot of commercializing and getting the value, to your point just a minute ago, out of everything that they worked hard to invent or create?
Since I stood in the walls of a university, I have not had the chance to speak with a lot of people who are outside of the university, right? But if they are outside of the university, or for example, for people within the university, within our university who are not university employees, like when they approach, and they always do, I have this idea, what do we do? I've always told them, come to me. I will introduce you to attorneys that will do a fantastic job in your area and will not charge you a lot of money, but do file or do enter into non-disclosure agreements. I have worked with a lot of ladies actually to help them do non-disclosure agreements so they don't give away the farm when they're talking about their technologies to others.
So are there like tips of 3 or 5 things you can offer to them, to do's and don'ts to protect whatever they've come up with?
Don't talk with others about your technology unless you have filed or unless you have done a non-disclosure agreement. Try to reach out to those who might know. People from outside university don't always ask university people. What if they do? I'm always happy to answer, right? Questions and or guide them to who to go to. The government also offers a lot of programs, right? So small business grants that the government provides for people to move their technology along if they can.
Got it. This has been incredibly informative. So is there anything I should have asked you, but I didn't, that would help any woman out there who has a scientific invention to get it out in the market?
No, you haven't. But the answer to that would be try to connect with other women like yourselves who are willing to help out and get help. Basically, just connect with them, get help. If you ask, there is so much help out there that you will be able to utilize.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laleh. This has been a really informative conversation. I've learned a ton of things that I didn't know before, and I'm very sure that many others, especially those in the sciences and STEM fields, will gain a lot, not just today, but hopefully for many years to come. So thank you. It's been a true pleasure.
Of course. And same here. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Take care.
Laleh is a unique type of professional most founders don't even know exist. So the entire conversation was full of interesting information to me. That said, a few insights really stood out. First and foremost, I was struck by the delicate balance professionals like her must strike between protecting the institution's interests while also supporting founders. But the important thing is that universities benefit from and want their founders to succeed. That's when everyone wins. So keep this in mind and leverage all the tech transfer resources your institution has available to advance your startup. Second, I got to better understand how critical it is, especially for newer researchers, to be really careful about when and how they publicize their research. Science and technology fields are particularly competitive. As a woman, it pays for you to get up to speed quickly so you can be proactive about protecting the value of your research before making it public in any format. If you want to know how, look no further than the story of Rosalind Franklin, the true discoverer of DNA, and how she was overshadowed. Last but not least, the details of your license agreement matter, and matter a lot. It pays to look ahead, think big, and think creatively, so you leverage every resource you have to maximize the impact that your startup, and therefore your research, will have on the world. So, research-based founders, what one step will you take to better steward the value of your hard work and its impact that you care about so much? Thanks for listening to today's episode. We have show notes and more at achieve.co. That's achieve.co/podcast. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe and share with a friend. See you on the next episode. Now, go be an achiever.